Today we're looking at Proverb number 25. And it's interesting because I just noticed something about the Proverbs. We had the beginning 9, which we're telling you about why you needed to be wise, why you needed to pursue knowledge and understanding and wisdom. A lot of a lot of figurativism, a lot of expressionism, a lot of poetry, a lot of ideas, a lot of reasonings. Then we got into the other, 10 through 24, which gave us the nuts and bolts. Here you go. Here's this, here's that, here's wisdom, here's good, here's bad. Here's righteous, here's unrighteous, here's wicked, here's forward. Here's the right thing to do, here's the wrong thing to do, here's a wayward woman, here's an unjust man. We got all of that. But in 25, we changed this a little bit. We know that there was a couple of hundred years between Solomon and Hezekiah. Solomon being the first king after David, of course, the establishment of good and proper kingdom and the place where the temple was. The temple had been established by Solomon, and then we had all of that turmoil with the breaking up of Israel into two kingdoms and all that happened there. And then we have the end is Hezekiah, right before Babylon is coming in. But Hezekiah had a good reign. He had a good start. It was too late because of Manasseh. But this is called the Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah copied out. So they copied some of the best ideas from Solomon to give to Hezekiah. So what we see in 25, 26 through 29 is what these copyists had done. They pulled through. Remember, Solomon had thousands of sayings. And they weeded through them and picked out the best ones about king, about being a good, strong king, about how a king should lead. And this was where Hezekiah leaned on, it seems, to be the king in his kingdom. And many times we men can look at this and say also, well, I'm the king in my kingdom under God, so I need to think like a king. These are kingly thoughts and kingly proverbs. So for 25 to 29, we'll be dealing with the Proverbs for a king. Not that women can't get something out of it. Also, there's a lot of good and strong ideas in here. But men who need to be in leadership positions, who are supposed to be in leadership positions, this is for them. The glory of the Lord is to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search it out. The idea not just through prayer and meditation, but have people search through scriptures. Become a man of the word yourself so that you can find and glean out. What we're doing here with grid work is actually the work of kings. This is the work that kings were supposed to do. Not just take another man's word for it. If you took another man's word for something and you were wrong, you paid. The heaven and the earth, the heavens for height and the earth for depth, and the heart of the kings is unsearchable. The idea that the king can keep searching. There's no end to him searching. He has all the abilities to search, all the resources. There's no stopping him from searching this out to the nth degree. Take away the dross from the silver, and there you'll bring forth a vessel for the finer. Take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne shall be established. Just like removing dross from silver is removing wicked from the king. Put not forth thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men. It is better that they say unto you, come up hither, that thou shouldest be taken to a lower position. So the idea that Jesus talked about this, don't seek the highest parts, when you go into a feast, for someone may come along and ask you to step down because you've gone too high. He's saying that same thing. Don't put thyself in the presence of a king. Stand not in the place of great men. For better is it to be said unto thee, come up here, than to be said, please put down. Please step down. So this is even in there. Even Jesus understood these proverbs and referenced them. Many of the things we've seen here, Jesus references. Of course, the wisdom that Solomon got was actually the wisdom of God, and who is God but Jesus. So actually, this is his own wisdom. Debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another. In other words, if you have something against your neighbor, don't slander them, don't gossip, go and talk with them. It talks about a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pitchers of silver. Again, very beautiful thing, very sweet thing to speak words pleasantly and in their appropriate times. Withdraw thy foot from the neighbor's house, lest you be weary of thee and to hate thee. I mean, that one's pretty practical. If you're over at somebody else's house, it might be time to go home. Very simple social etiquettes that we forget or we don't do, that we need to be taught, that we need to understand how to relate with others in a very sociable way. It talks about that in Kings, or need to set the tone with sociability in that standard. If thine enemy are hungry, put bread out, and if he's thirsty, give him water, for thou shalt heap coals upon his head, and the Lord will reward thee. Doing good to your neighbor, your enemy. This is something Jesus also referred to. Again, we see some very interesting parallels here. Excuse me. And so, yeah, do that, and you heap coals of fire on his head. He'll feel embarrassed that you took care of him when he was your enemy. He'll feel, maybe some self-loathing, some guilt that I'm doing this bad thing for him, yet they're doing good things for me. It is better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than with a brawling woman in a white house. We've seen that one before. Again, a king shouldn't be brawling. Step away. Say, no, I'm not going to discuss this anymore until we both have a calmer frame. So, this is what he's saying here. A king should always have a calm frame. Say, a righteous man falleth down before the wicked as a troubled fountain and a corrupt spring. It is not good to eat too much honey, for such men search out for their glory, and it's not glory. If you're searching out too much sweetness, too much niceness, too much of one type of thing, it's not good. You need to be exploring, searching out other things. Don't just get into one vein, one thing. Don't just go after the nice stuff. Sometimes you have to deal with adversity. Sometimes you have to deal with lack. Sometimes you have to deal with hard things. Deal with those things too. A very good proverb here in chapter 25, and like I said, 26 through 29, we'll look at more of these. But these are for kings. So let's think like a king, think like we have the responsibilities of kings, and learn how to work with those responsibilities and accountabilities as a king. Going back to First Chronicle, we'll be stepping in to chapter 22 today. Just going back a little bit, we saw in 17 how David wanted to do, he wants to make this house for the Lord, but Nathan from God tells him, no, you're not going to do it, but your son's going to do it. So we also go and we see in chapter 18 where he goes and fights with the neighbors, and he's not picking the fight. They're coming at him. That day it came to pass that David smote the Philistines. The Philistines started coming at him. We had the Ammonites making league with the Syrians. We had the Edomites coming up. We had all these groups coming up, and David goes to war with them and has them now take tribute. Many of them are now his servants, and he's creating this area. And this is later going to be an area of peace. These people that now know that Israel is strong, there's nothing they can do about it, so you'd better live at peace with this guy. And that's going to help with Solomon. We're going to see that come out in a minute. There's a reason why 18 is here. That the peace that Solomon had at his day was not really from Solomon. It was David. David was setting up on purpose. Think about this. He wanted the temple, and he couldn't build it, so he knew his son was going to have to build it. So he sets up, again, we're going to see him pulling all the resources together to do this. But he knows also they're going to have peace. Peace comes from strength. So I'm going to make sure I have all these people in line before my son comes up and has to deal with them and try to set up the kingdom. Remember, Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. But that peace came from going to war against his enemies. What's the enemy of Christ? It's sin. It's not people. It's these attitudes that we have. It's this sinful flesh, this sinful nature that's in man. And he came to take care of that, to take care of his enemies, so now that we could have this peace. So Jesus is both David, and Jesus will also, on the second coming, be Solomon, a man of peace after the wars that end all wars. So we see this in 18. In 19, we have him we have what happened with Amnon when the king died and David sent his messengers in, and they treated him with disdain. And then Amnon gets Syria. We talked about that. And now, after the whole battle was over, Amnon and Syria are fighting, and Joab and Abishai split up the forces and beat them. Syrian king doubles down. We didn't see Amnon double down. We saw the Syrian double down. We saw Israel double down, and then Israel beats Syria and Amnon. Amnon makes peace, and Syria's like, man, that's messed up. We came in and it's on your side. I even doubled down for you, and now you're making peace? Syria goes, no, Amnon, forget it, we're done. So that happened there, and it's really interesting that that happened in 19. We talk about, again, David taking kingdom in 20. In 21, Satan comes in and provokes David to sin against God by counting the people. And this is where we get to the pestilence of God going across the threshing floor. Going across Jerusalem. Again, we're talking about Jerusalem. And we have it going across this threshing floor. And David buys the threshing floor. The guy offers it to him for free. He goes, no, I won't have anything that costs me nothing. So God stops right at the threshing floor. Now we'll find that this threshing floor also becomes where we're going to put the temple. And it's amazing when you think about it. The temple wasn't just picked randomly. Oh, that spot looks clean. It's a plot. It's a place where mercy and wrath met. And they met there. And with God seeing the contrition of the leaders and of David, and he stops the sword. In the place of the stopping of the sword is where we're going to put the Ark of the Covenant. Very, very good imagery there. We see David said, this is the house of the Lord. This is the altar of the burnt offerings. He commanded, gather together the strangers that were in the land, then the masons, and they started preparing. They couldn't do the temple, but they could get all the pieces together. So he starts getting abundance of nails and doors and brass. It says brass in abundance without weight. It doesn't mean they didn't know. They just didn't count it. They just started picking brass and throwing it in the corner. They didn't weigh it as they went. They weighed the gold and the silver as they went, but the brass they just threw over there. It's not that they had a big amount. They just had a big amount that they didn't count. So he gets all of this together. He gets the cedars in abundance from Tyre, from his friends over in Tyre. He talks with his son Solomon, and he explains that my son is tender, and the house will be a building of the house exceedingly magnificent. And he called for his son, and he tells his son the story. He tells his son about how God, he wanted to do this, but God said he was a man of war. He wanted to do this in Solomon's age, in a time of peace, in a time of rest, in a time of economic growth, in a time where we could see the abundance of what God has. Very simple. This would be a time of the abundance when you're at peace with your neighbors because you're stronger than them, that you have this great economy. Silver is like stones on the street. Everyone's eating well. There's plenty of meat. The cows are not, they're not having miscarriages and stillbirths and stuff. You have a lot of cows. You have a lot of sheep. You've got the farms and the vineyards are growing well. There's plenty for everybody. And all of a sudden you can start being, handing this out and creating friendships with these other neighbors. People don't want to attack you if you're feeding them. Makes sense. And he talks to his son, talks to him about this, that behold, a man shall born of thee, and that's what God had told him, to be a man of rest, and you will give him rest, and for his name shall be Solomon. You get the idea that God told David about Solomon before the birth of Solomon. Very interesting thing here. And he shall build a house in my name. And now, my son, the Lord is with thee, and will prosper thee and build a house. He tells him that the Lord's going to be like his father, and he'll be like the Lord's son. He'll take care of him. Only the Lord give thee wisdom and understanding, and give thee charge concerning Israel, that you may keep the law of the Lord. The one thing Solomon needed to do was keep the law of the Lord. Keep the law of the Lord. All you got to do is keep the statutes and commandments, the ordinances. David even goes, we're going to see in these other chapters, that he sets up these ordinances. He sets up all this stuff he sets up all of the Levites. He sets up those of Aaron. He sets up the porters. We're going to see all of that in a minute. He sets up all this structure. He provides the materials, the workmen, the nails, the cedars, everything to build this thing, and he already gets the Aaronic priesthood going with the sons of Aaron. He gets the Levites going. He gets the porters. He's got all these things set up. He's got the captain setting up. Everything's ready for him to just step up to the plate, I should say. And he talks about how he's prepared all of this, the gold and the silver, that is beyond number. And he talks to his son, saying, "Is not the Lord God with you? And hath he not given you rest on every side? Now set your heart and your soul to seek the Lord your God." So David tells him this. Now David is old here. He's 70. He's getting ready to pass on. And so David was old and full of days, and he made Solomon king over Israel. He gathered together all the Levites and those that were 30 years and upward. Here he starts in 23, setting up again the Levitical priesthood. Now, the interesting thing about thinking about history is sometimes we've gone through the whole history. We've gone through David, we went through all the kings, we saw the splitting of the kingdoms, we saw the Assyrians come and take the northern, then we saw through Hezekiah and then Zedekiah, and then here comes the Babylonians. Now we got to wash a lot of that off and go back to the beginning. They had just come out of the time of the judges. They'd just come out from the first kingdom of Saul, which really didn't set things up pretty well. The Levites were kind of, helter-skelter. Yes, they had their 3 houses, but there was some disarray. And the places of Aaronic priesthood, some disarray going on and officiations and stuff. Here, he sets up the org chart. Here, he goes back and sets it up properly. We're going to do this, and we're going to do it right. So what he does is he goes and finds the names of the sons of Levi, Gershon, Korath, and Merari. And he finds the Gershonites and starts tracking their genealogy so that people would know what family you are and then what your responsibilities are. You didn't just walk in on a job site and go, "What do you guys want me to do?" They'd say, "Well, what family are you?" And that'll tell you what you're supposed to do. He sets up the lineage of Korath, which Aaron and Moses were in. And if you're in that lineage, here's what you're going to do. He sets up Merari, and here's what you're going to do. See, at David's time, think about this. These 3 groups of Levites were going to be changing because these were the guys who carried the tabernacle everywhere, took it apart, set it up. They were responsible for all the beams and for wrapping up the things in silver and for carrying things around. Now they weren't going to do that anymore. Now we're going to build a place for all this. So you guys are going to change what you're doing. You're going to change. The org charts changes. So we see him lining this up in 24. He starts breaking it down so people would have a genealogy from, like I said, Levi through Gershom and all the sons of Gershom, from Levi to Merari, all the sons of Merari, from Levi to Korath, all the sons of Korath. He takes a sidebar with the sons of Aaron because they are the high priest. So we can see that going on here. And he's get this all organized. So all Solomon has to do is flip a switch and things will start happening. We see here in 24, and please read all of this, he talks about the sons. He lines them out. He even mentions Aaron and Moses. He talks about the sons of Gershom. He talks about these men. He talks about the sons of Merari and how the different ones were there. And these were men 20 and up. And David said, "For the Lord God of Israel has given rest unto the people, that they may dwell in Jerusalem forever." This is about Jerusalem, guys. We're talking about Jerusalem. So he does set this up. For the last words of David, the Levites were numbered from 20 and up. So he's getting into his last days, and he's setting this up. And they are to go in to work in the courts and chambers and the purifying of holy things and doing the work of the Lord, both for the showbread and for the fine flour and for the unleavened cakes. We go back now thinking like Moses, thinking like Leviticus, thinking like this. And David's trying to renew all that and get that structure going. And these guys will be standing standing every morning to give thanks and praise to the Lord. Likewise in the evening, and they shall offer burnt offerings unto the Lord on Sabbaths and new moons and feasts. And they shall keep the charge of the tabernacle and the care of the holy place. So he sets up the structure. And we're going to see more of the setup of the structure. But David is doing this well. And this is all going to bode well. But again, the focus, like I said, it went from the world to the area, to Israel, to Judah, to David, and now to Jerusalem. And now we're focusing in on the temple. This is the reason for Chronicles. We're going to see how everything fits around Jerusalem and the temple. This isn't just history books. This is focus. Focus is different than history. History will tell you everything that happened around in the area. Focus wants to focus in on what's most important, especially to the author. This is where God's going to put his name, and it's very important to him. We need to see what he's saying and not just write it off as a bunch of names and a bunch of history, because there is so much more here. Thank you.